Welcome to Ideagen TV. We are honored today to have with us a global leader, a luminary, a visionary, and a great friend of Ideagen, Alexandra Mitsotakis. Alexandra, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hello from Greece, Athens.
Well, it's such an incredible moment in time, Alexandra. And, of course, we cannot overstate the importance of the name Alexandra. It's also our daughter's name. So a huge fan of you, your belief in what we do at Ideagen. But at the same time, it's quite remarkable the work that you're doing at the World Human Forum. Could you tell us, before we launch into an incredible panel interview, what it is that you're doing at World Human Forum?
Thank you, first of all, again, for having me here and allow me to share with you something that sounded like a completely crazy idea a few years ago when we started, the creation of a World Human Forum. There is obviously the World Economic Forum in Davos. There is, for those who know about it, the World Social Forum in Porto Alegre in Brazil. But we felt that neither of them really captures the spirit of our time. We live, after all, in the Anthropocene, and that means that the human has to be at the center of what we do. And to put the human back in the center, we felt the best possible name for what we wanted to do was to call it the World Human Forum. And the idea was very simple. The idea was to say, today, the challenges we face as humanity are huge. They've never been bigger. We have a common agenda, the 17 SDGs, that we know, but how are we going to get there? And in order to get there, we believe that we need the energy, the inventiveness, the creativity of each and every one of us. We believe that the solutions are not coming now only down from top down. In fact, most of the solutions are coming from the bottom up. There are men and women all around the world, in slums, in villages, in towns, in cities, in America, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, who are proposing us a million new inventive solutions. And it's to celebrate that movement that we felt we needed to have something that we call the World Human Forum, and the best place to have it and start it was from Greece, and more particularly from Delphi.
Well, and what an incredible project and incredible impact that you're having with the World Human Forum. I know you have a lot of amazing plans and strategies around changing the world. And
in fact, we have developed over the last 3 years a series of tools. And probably our most innovative and useful tool is something we call the Delphic Tube. Now, I know it looks very much like the famous Rubik's Cube, but it is the exact contrary of the Rubik's Cube. What it tells you is that we have to stop separate the issues. We have to connect them. We are only going to win when we will understand that, in fact, the economic problems, the political problems, the issues around education, the issues around democracy, around science and technology, the arts, everything has to go together, to work together. And this approach is something that is very dear to us. And it has to be connected with the 17 SDGs, because we believe that the 17 SDGs can only be addressed to in a global way, in a total way. We shouldn't be separating them so much. We should understand that this is about transforming the whole system. And to transform the system, the 17 SDGs are, in fact, different approaches of one issue. How are we going to share a finite planet when we will be not 7.5 billion as we are today, but 8, 9, possibly 10 billion in the future? And this holistic approach that gives a space and a role to each and every one of us, this is the message we want to share from Greece and from the World Human Forum.
Well, that's an incredible message, clearly inspiring, and obviously we at Ideagen believe strongly in the 17 global goals because, again, to remind our global audience, they were agreed upon unanimously by all 193 member states of the United Nations, and including the United States of America. And so none of them are goals that are controversial in terms of needing to accomplish them by 2030. And so, Alexandra, could I kindly ask you to introduce our panelists today?
Yes, but I want to add something more. You have, if we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, and if we are reminded that there are 17, we have created this little SDG tarot game. And we have the 17 goals in 17 cards. But if you ask the question, who is responsible for implementing them, then the answer for us is actually very clear. All those actors. And those actors are obviously our governments, obviously the corporate sector, obviously the non-for-profit organizations. But the most important actor, which is A, is us, the individuals. And this I would not like us to forget, because unless we get involved, all of us get involved in the realization of the implementation of the 17 SDGs, we won't succeed. And today is the day for partnerships for the goals. It's goal 17, and that is the goal that we believe is the one that, in a sense, is the closest to our hearts, because it's through partnerships, the 17th goal, that the other 16 are going to be implemented.
Well, what's incredible about what you just said is that the individual can also play a role. You know, it's sometimes hard to connect what can I do with changing the world, but in fact, when you look at the global goals, there are things that individuals across the world can do to affect and impact and create that awareness and ultimately help to achieve those goals by 2030.
First of all, let me say that politicians, corporate leaders, academics, scientists, we are all also humans. We are fathers and mothers and sons, and we care about those we love, and we care about our own well-being. So all of us are simultaneously individual human beings, and through our role, we have another capacity. But first of all, we need to make this our agenda. And if that happens, then the rest will follow. About our guests of today, I want to bring back this little tube, because if one side of our tube is the sustainability agenda, our analysis is to say we will not succeed unless we link it immediately to democracy. This will not come as a surprise as I speak from Greece, but we believe that democracy is non-negotiable here, because democracy means participation, means inclusiveness, means shared responsibility. This is why the role of everyone is so important. But next to democracy, how do you educate citizens who are agents of change? That means that we have to think about our educational system, and that brings us to education. And then there is another element which we tend to forget, which is our inner personal development, our own capacity to come to terms with ourselves, with the ones we love, with nature, with the world around us. It's the spiritual dimension, if you want, the philosophical dimension of who we are as humans. It's all this idea of know thyself. That's another side of our cube. But we have two more sides in a six-side cube. And one of them is the arts. And that's where I would like to introduce Jochen Sandig, because Jochen comes from the world of the arts, but he cares as much as I about sustainability, about democracy, about education. And I think that the way he and I met just shows how we can link to each other through a common vision, through a common dream to make this world a better place to succeed. And Jochen and I, we just met in a plane. We were sitting next to each other and we started talking. And when I shared with him this idea of a World Human Forum, all he said is, I would like to join that effort. And a few years later, we are here together, and he's part of our team of creating the World Human Forum, and I really want to thank him. And now I think he can say what he wants to say from Germany.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can
Hello,
hear
everybody. Great.
Hello, Johan.
So I'm happy to join the conversation as the co-founder of the World Human Forum right from the beginning. And I'm very thankful that two people meeting in the plane are the seed of something which involves maybe, hopefully, all of us. And when Alexandra introduced me to the idea, I was just about, as a director, I produced a piece called The Human Requiem, which is also very much in the spirit of what the World Human Forum wants to create, a shared community and experience of a cathartic knowledge. Know thyself is one of the Delphic themes. And know thyself means for each individual human being is to be considering our mortality. So the Human Requiem, in fact, tries to show to us that we are a family because we as human beings in our mortality have something in common, and not beyond all the national borders and everything that is separating us. We have this shared community thing. So I'm here now in Frankfurt because we are receiving an award for our festival program, which I show you. And it's very much based, it's very colorful, as you can see, but it's very much based on the colors of what Alexandra spoke about, the Sustainable Development Goals. And you can see here, when you see in the book, that we started the whole journey of developing a graphic design by the colors, the 17 colors of the 17 Sustainable Goals. And I'm very happy. Here is, for example, a photo of the Church of Delphi and of Ludwigsburg. And you can see here the castle where the festival happens. And here you can see, for example, the World Human Forum that came to us this year. Here is a photo of a Delphic temple, ancient temple. But coming back to the question, I had a meeting in January with Amina J. Mohammed, the Vice General Secretary of United Nations, asking her the question what she thinks about how the importance of the arts joining the spread of the Sustainable Development Goals. And you know what she said to me? Well, she said, Jochen, we developed a roadmap 4 years ago, but we believe strongly that the arts, music, dance, literature, film have the power to put people emotionally in motion. And that's really what we are trying to do. Me, not only as co-founder of the World Human Forum, but also as the head of a festival, which I completely transform, which is a traditional festival, 90 years old. And I put it completely under the framework of the 17 SDGs. And that means to really strongly, with our team, reflect how we can be democratic, how we can be sustainable, how we can establish gender equality in the artistic agenda and all the other goals. And it's a big challenge, and we know we cannot go there easily. We have 2030 as the goal set up by United Nations, but it's a process. And going to that journey is a lot of fun, and it's a big challenge. Sometimes it feels like Sisyphus with a stone, getting up the hill and going down. But knowing that, as Alexandra said, so many people in the world are working on the same principles makes us a big human family. And I think that is part of why I believe, in spite of all the problems that we face, climate change, loss of democracy and everything, and also Black Lives Matter, all the racism in the world, we have really now is the time where we join all our forces, and also reflecting what Alexandra said. I strongly believe that the individuals, they have to take the lead now, because the corporate sector is just influencing the government, and the non-profit sector is not strong enough. But the individuals are holding all the power in their hand. And if we manage to bring all four stakeholders together, goal number 17 is the partnership. I think then we will succeed. I'm getting back to the moderation.
Okay,
Hello?
thank you, Jochen. And if we look at another guest, he and I, again, we met by accident just a year ago in California. And there again, I just shared with him this vision, the idea to create the World Human Forum from Greece, from Delphi. And this is a man who had never been to Greece. But when he heard the idea, he immediately got interested. We started talking, and a few weeks later, he was with us in Paris and then in Greece. And today, he is also part of our team. His entry point is different from Jochen's. If Jochen comes in from the side of the arts, Khalil is coming in from what we call the personal development side, because he found the strength to rethink not only his own life, but to rethink his role vis-a-vis the others, vis-a-vis the world, vis-a-vis all of us. And I'm very happy and very proud to have Khalil with us today. So just share with us, Khalil, what inspired you to join us.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in today's conversation, Alexandra. It's so nice to see everyone. And I really just want to say that the conversation we're having is perhaps one of the most important conversations that's taking place around the world today. And we need to be mindful of why this conversation is taking place. And what I mean by that is people increasingly are becoming aware of their power to effect meaningful change in the world. And as we think about the SDGs, for me, the first thing that comes to mind, I raised the question, what is the ultimate aim of the SDGs? What are we seeking to do? What do we hope to accomplish? And basically, they've defined it as three core things. One is end poverty. And we must be clear that poverty is man-made. Second, protect the planet. Imagine that our environment is essential to our well-being. And third, ensure prosperity for everyone. Now, when you think about these three objectives, the core aim of the SDGs, and you really make it granular in a way that individuals can grasp, well, everyone understands in poverty, particularly the people who are in it. We, the common person, the common woman, man, child that we encounter anywhere in the world can grasp the significance, the visceral importance of protecting the planet. And this idea of ensuring prosperity for everyone, I think every human being at their core can appreciate others having what they have, and that all of us ought to have equal access to whatever is meaningful and essential to all of our existence. So I start from the place of, on one level, we have to answer the question, how do we want to treat each other as a society? And that's fundamentally what we mean by democracy. But then there's an existential question that has to be asked of every participant in the democracy, every citizen. And that is, what kind of human being do I choose to be? And I'm being very intentional about my language in saying, what kind of human being do I choose to be? Because we don't arrive at who we are without some thought about what's meaningful, what we value. And those values have impact. Now, I say that as a person who has had many struggles with this ideal of what kind of human being do I choose to be. Having grown up and in my teenage years, found myself in the midst of social upheaval, not much unlike what we are seeing today around the world, but particularly in America. I grew up on the heels of the civil rights movement, with the emergence of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, a kind of social protest that was growing, particularly in communities of color throughout the United States, remembering that in my generation, when we talk about the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the great march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the importance of the significance of the civil rights movement at that time, many of the people who know about that, for example, are unmindful of the fact, are unaware of the fact that that was sparked by the killing of an African-American man named Jimmy Lee Jackson by a police officer. That was in 1964. So we're talking about issues in our democracy with respect to SDGs that have to, at some point, find relevance for the individual if the SDGs are to be meaningful, if they're to be achieved. I mean, 2030 is around the corner. And if you look at today's social climate, we really have to be skeptical as to how far we're going to get in this short period of time with respect to the ultimate aim, unless we become more cognizant of the power of the individual person to live a life that's transformative. And I speak that not from an armchair perspective, but from having done it. I served 20 years in prison. I served those 20 years essentially starting as a young man, 17 years old. My thinking was such that at the time, my ideas about what democracy meant and my place in it and its relevance to me were antithetical to the ideals that I heard and the rhetoric that I was taught in school. And I developed a very different way of thinking about the world. And in fact, the way that I began to think about the world as a consequence of what I learned was that I was powerless. I didn't realize how powerful I was for many years. But what triggered it was the recognition on my way to prison for the second time that I actually was not going to prison as much as there was racial inequality and structural injustice. I was going back to prison, not because of the structural inequality. What I recognized is that as much as that existed, my personal power was more substantial, more meaningful for me in terms of what I could do with the circumstance I found myself in once I became conscious of how to use that power. So when I think about the SDGs, I think about, this is not a question of of people who are at the bottom of society seizing power. This is a question of how do we, who are the masses of the world, reimagine our use of the power we already have. That's what recognition of the existential question that individuals have to ask. That's what the ultimate aim is. It is to reimagine the power that we have to change the world. So I would say it this way: all power starts with self-perception, how you see yourself. Second, all behavior is learned. Consequently, it can be unlearned. And third, choose love. Choose it. The Dalai Lama says, imagine a world in which we make decisions informed by compassion. Imagine how different the world would be. But I don't mean the external world. I imagine existentially how different each of our worlds would be if we decided to treat each other with compassion.
Thank you, Khalil.
Thank you.
I would like to add a quote from Friedrich Schiller, who was actually born in Ludwigsburg in Marbach, and he said, all humans will become brothers and sisters. And this is Beethoven's Ninth Symphony that we all recognize as one of the big symphonies, as a hymn of our time. But in fact, what Khalil just said is, we are already brothers and sisters because we all have a shared origin. And I think this is what we have to celebrate. And it starts with this recognition or perception of community that starts with each individual. And this is exactly what Delphi said with know thyself, is also know ourself as a big we in the ego in Alexandra, you will correct me, in Greek the ego has on the other side the emis, and the emis is all of us, is the we. And in the word power,
Yes.
the English word power is the word, the small two-letter word we. So in power is us, are we, or as Patti Smith says, people have the power. So let's use that power and make the best out of it.
Well, I'd like to say, you know, Khalil, that was an incredible journey that you described. And this is a real understanding of journey and impact here at Ideagen when we're talking about this journey to achieving the goals by 2030. You just described so succinctly what it is that an individual should be thinking and how they should be reimagining. The word reimagine, as an English major, you know, I'm a big fan of words, and I think words have meaning, obviously. And just that one word, reimagine, allows you to take yourself out of where you are perhaps at the moment to consider an alternate or another reality that you're not then bound by where you are today, no matter what your circumstance. So for an individual to rethink and reimagine the journey to achieving the goals and what can the world look like in 2030? I mean, no poverty, ending hunger. You know, Atul Tandon from Opportunity International, a great friend, spoke at the United Nations at one of our summits and said, imagine the world on a day when everyone can go to bed with a full stomach. And the entire chamber was silent because that brought you to a point where you're imagining the obverse of that. Imagine how many people, brothers and sisters across the planet, are going to bed hungry every single day. Just that one issue alone within the context of the SDGs is enough to, you know, give you a chill in a sense, right? And then you understand, and then you step back though, and you say, well, gosh, I'm an individual. Where do I begin? Where can I begin to create impact? But I think what we heard today from Johan, from you, Khalil, and of course from our good friend Alexandra, is that an individual can actually change the world. And they are doing that. They were on a plane together, and poof, they create this incredible organization based on a conversation of shared interests and reimagining, perhaps, the world as they see it in the future. I'd like to ask you all, and this is a general question to start this interview, what do you think is the best approach for achieving the global goals by 2030? Johan? You're muted.
I think there is not one best way, but I strongly believe, as also I would really like to answer what I said before, it has to be fun. It has to be playful. It has to be beautiful. It has to create a passion. And why are people setting themselves in motion? It starts with emotion. You know, when I had this meeting with Amina J. Mohammed, the Vice Secretary General of the United Nations, she said, we created that roadmap 4 years ago, but not as many people know the SDGs. How can we deal with it? It's not a PR company, a global PR strategy is needed. No, we have to start with music, with dance, with education in schools. It has to be spread out everywhere. But the first thing is it has to be fun. It has to be playful. It has to really set people in motion by themselves. So nobody can tell other people what they have to do. They have to really get that inner emotion, that joy, that Khalil said it, that love. And that will be so strong, and it goes and grows with experience. If people, and then now in the Corona pandemic, we are socially distant, and more than ever, we need to reconnect, because we have to make use of the digital tools as we now have that conversation over continents, over time zones. Let's really use technology, and let's really join all our forces. And we have to get also the rich people on board. They, like the 10 richest men on the planet, they own more than all the rest of the world. So we have to get them on board. And I think the World Economic Forum missed it. As Alexandra said, human at heart, the World Human Forum and the SDGs are teaching us that the economic is not the master thing. Love, you cannot buy. That's the point. And I think, as Khalil mentioned, we don't want that people go to bed hungry. We don't want people go to bed and being afraid that they will be not wake up again because they will be killed. So I think all that issues, if you put them together, coming back to the cube that Alexandra showed us, when the 6 sides of the cube join with human and heart, then we can achieve it. And we have to be playful. So the cube is a game. This little tarot game is a game, and that creates a playfulness. And I think we have to be more inventive about all the strategies. It's not only about setting up the SDGs and then you can expect they will automatically be fulfilled. We have to be very, very inventive, creating games and all that things. That's from my side.
Well, let me turn the question over to Khalil. Khalil, what do you see as the best approach to achieving the global goals by 2030?
Well, I think Johan is precisely right in terms of framing this important work in the context of fun. And how I would say that is, culture is the container for ideas and behavior. It's really important to grasp the role, the impact of culture in shaping behavior, in shaping even the way that we define our lives and express our values. So when Johan says that we must have fun, it must be done in a way that leverages our desire for fun. I think he's hit something that's very nuanced about this work that we do. And that is, popular culture is one of the most powerful tools to shape thinking and behavior globally. Evidence of that is, as an African American, I remember when I first moved to South Africa, a very close friend of mine in South Africa said to me one day, he said, you know, I watch African Americans all the time on TV, and I see a lot of things about African Americans. He says, but I have come to see you as the rich, poor people. And I was stunned. I was like, what do you mean, the rich, poor people? He said, the only ones who sees African Americans as poor is African Americans. This is an South African saying to me that his perception of me was that as a group, as an ethnic group in America, we saw ourselves as poor, but the rest of them in South Africa and around the world saw us as incredibly powerful and incredibly wealthy and incredibly well-resourced. And that's in the face of our contradictions. So I'm highlighting that point to suggest to you that there is a lot happening on a cultural level that we can access if we're more intentional, if we're more mindful about the role that culture plays, and begin to communicate in what I call the more macro level on one side of it, but in ways that are infused with messages centered on love, with messages that are tempered by compassion, with language that excites the best in us, something that makes us want to be aspirational in the way we live our daily lives. And I'll just land this or contextualize this conversation about what can we do as you're raising it. Here's what I've learned about racism. After 200,000 years of human history, we have still not figured out how to love each other. So this fundamental question that you're raising is a question that can only be answered when we learn to love. We cannot end poverty and protect the planet and ensure prosperity for all unless we make an individual, a deep existential commitment to love. And absent that sentiment, absent that emotion, absent that action, we are going to continue to see the kind of absurd, senseless violence and divisions that we're witnessing around the world today.
Incredibly well said, Khalil. You know, it takes your breath away when you think about the journey that we're all on as you know, citizens of this planet.
Yes.
And here we are, we're live. You know, you're in Florida, Alexandra's in Athens, Johan is in Germany, and we're talking about these global goals, which really are the human goals, the individual goals, right? As so many people state. Let me ask Alexandra a question. Alexandra, what do you see as one of the biggest inhibitors, roadblocks, stumbling factors in reaching these global goals by 2030?
For me, if it's only said in one word, I would say defeatism. What we need is optimism. What we need is resolute optimism that it can be done. This, I think, is the big question that we are facing, because we hear a lot of narratives that tell us that we are at the brink of disaster, that humanity might face extinction of human life on Earth. And a big part of it is absolutely truth. That's the worst of it. But the good news is that it can be done under certain conditions. And I think the first condition is to believe in it, to find the resolute optimism in us that we can do it. And for that, I think we have to tear down a few more silos, one of them being between two important words with Greek roots, ecology and economy. We have to stop opposing economy and ecology. We need both because they are both about the same thing. They're both about ecos. Ecos is our common home. It's our own home as families, as individuals. It's our home as nations. It's our home on planet Earth. And the one is about the laws of the economy, of the ecos, and that's the economy. And the other is about the sense that it makes, the logic behind it. What is ecology? It is really about the logic that builds our common home, and we need both together. And I think if we tear down that silo, and if we understand that one goes with the other, we will have made a big step forward, and that will give us the optimism to try more. And the other silo I think we have to break down is between this absurd distinction between the human and nature. We are not fighting to protect nature. We are fighting to protect our human existence because we are part of nature. We are not opposing nature. We keep talking about conquering nature, about winning over nature, but we will not, and we never will, because in the end, nature is still around us, and it is proving every day that unless we understand that we are part of it, there is no way we can be stronger than nature. So it is really about understanding our position here as humans, as being part of nature, as going in the direction of cooperation and not competition. And in that sense, of course, I joined Khalil about love, because cooperation is about trust, is about respect of diversity, is about believing that we have our solutions, others have others, and we have to join our forces. And if we do that, then optimism can be born out of this. And with optimism and joy and love, I think we will succeed, and we will prove that it can be done.
That's right, Alexandra. You said it so succinctly, and this is a true global conversation. As we look at the global goals, so Alexandra, you grew up in an incredible family. You saw how hard your parents worked, especially your father having to lead a nation as the Prime Minister of Greece. Now your brother is in the same role. My gosh, you've seen leadership. You've seen the power also of the individual. So you've seen every angle, really, from the private sector to the public sector to NGOs, this cross-sector element. What do you believe are three key pieces of advice that you can provide to our global audience, millions of people across the world looking to you for three key pieces of advice on achieving the global goals?
Well, I think partnerships and alliances are probably the key to it. It is new partnerships, new type of alliances. May I just say that I come from the NGO world, and that I've seen a lot of NGOs can do. But as you said, I also come from a political family, and I know the importance of politics. But politics on its own will not succeed. You cannot do it unless society is leading and following you at the same time. And this is the complexity between the bottom-up and the top-down I was talking earlier about. The bottom-up movements of society, based on our individual behavior, based on our values, based on our belief of who we are and what we want to achieve, have to guide and meet the political will. And of course, then there is the corporate sector. But let me just say very clearly that when we talk about, for instance, environmental degradation and the role of all of us here, let me give a very concrete example. We have NGOs working on the environment, on ecological issues, but we have also the different faith-based groups. We have the role of the Catholic Church, the role of the Orthodox Church. Usually those words are words that are completely apart, and it's as if they live in different worlds. But this, I think, is the limit of our system today. We have to learn to respect the diverse approaches, and whether you come in from an NGO or from a faith-based organization, or through politics, or as a simple mother and father and son who wants to play a role in creating a better future, those alliances, we have to make them. And we have to understand that there is a role for every one of us. So it is really about alliances, partnerships, optimism, and the profound belief that it can be done because it is already happening. I would like to say that we hear too much of the negative stories. And it is true. We can hear the noise of the trees that are falling, because when they fall, they make a lot of noise. But we don't hear the noise of the forest that is growing. And a forest is growing all around us with all those amazing initiatives that are taken through individuals, through NGOs, but mainly through, at the political level also, but mainly from the bottom up, from men and women who want to build this better world. And this new forest that is growing, this is that allows us to be optimistic, and this is what we should remember, that it can be done in the end.
You know, alliances, partnership, optimism, such incredible insights, and what an incredible analogy to highlight the noise that a tree makes when it falls but also in the obverse, the growing forest that you really cannot hear. I think that's a great analogy for how individuals across the planet can have impact. And ultimately, what I'm hearing from the three of you is that we need a cross-sector approach to achieve and create these solutions. It's not just one entity. It was not so long ago that we heard either a corporate or an NGO or even the public sector leaders saying, oh, we can do this on our own. We're not going to partner with anybody. And now you're almost universally, people from the arts, from Hollywood, you name it, they're saying, you know what, we can't do this alone. We need to partner. We need to create these partnerships, whether it's in an individual beginning this partnership path or a company saying we're going to invest in this community. You know, what I think this pandemic has highlighted, and I think we all agree on this, is that it's shining a big spotlight on inequality across the planet. And we now have an opportunity to really help address these inequalities across the planet in ways that perhaps we could not have pre-pandemic. And so there is, and there lies an opportunity for individuals and all of these organizations to address what Khalil so incredibly articulately stated. I mean, I think you put it into words that individuals across the planet, Khalil and Johan, and of course, Alexandra, the words you all have used today have been so powerful. And by the way, we're trying to provide inspiration here. We're trying to create the sort of future, to project into the future, to reinvent, to reimagine, as Khalil said, to reimagine. It sounds like Disney World, but this is reality. You can reimagine.
Sounds more like John Lennon.
John Lennon. That's right. So,
can I just take you on a time journey? 30 years ago, there was a wall separating the two Germany, you know, and the fall of the Berlin Wall. Nobody in the world has expected it to happen. It was a bottom-up movement, a social peaceful movement that made that wall to fall. And I think it's a beautiful symbol for all of us that, as Alexandra said, things can be done that are unimaginable, because the world was separated in communism and capitalism, and Berlin was the symbol of the separation of these two worlds. Now we are about to create a new world. And I think capitalism didn't win over communism. I think we have to create new economies, as Alexandra said, very much based on the ecological thinking. Maybe not breaking down silos, but building bridges and make it one. It's the two metals of one coin, or two sides of one coin. It belongs together. And I think this we have to learn. As much as the two Germanys belong together and they came together, we have to learn all what was said, that separation is actually leading to the catastrophe, and joining what has to grow together, as the German said, now grows together. What belongs together was the common sense at the time when the wall came to fall. Now we have to focus on that. It has to grow together what belongs together.
You know, Khalil, it's just remarkable the way you're describing this, and there's a parallel. There's many parallels. In the United States, you may or may not be aware that there's a movement with companies. Good friend Alex Gorski, Johnson & Johnson, on the Business Roundtable, they have redefined the purpose of a corporation to include that element of not just the shareholder, which is obviously important, but also the communities that these companies work in, live in, impact. And so the other piece to that is that if you have a company, if you align what you're doing with the communities you're in, you can actually perhaps do better. And what happens when you do better? You can do more good. So it's all a cycle. And it's not necessarily, you know, from opposing sides. It's we can make more money and we can do more good. And
we have to
what
think
it-
about the share giver value, and
There
not only the shareholder value.
the share giver value, right? So there's an incredible opportunity. I think many companies, especially in the United States, are embracing that notion. You know, one of our board members early on was that he was president of the Verizon Foundation, and is actually the person who brought corporate social responsibility to the United States, Patrick Gaston. And Patrick said, you know, at Verizon, we can bring and align mission, business, philanthropy. And clearly it worked because they started to make investments in communities where their company had a presence. And so that alignment and understanding and helping companies understand and navigate the world of impact, I think, is such an exciting part of the solution process, because it's not just government. You know, for so long we've said, please, you know, government, help us. It's everybody in this together, from the individual to the company to the NGO, and all together, an individual can create that spark in that community as well, to Khalil's point. So, you know, also to mention our late chairman emeritus, former Congressman Louis Stokes. Congressman Louis Stokes, Lou was a statesman. He was a giant. We at Ideagen stand on his shoulders. We stand